You're watching the Metaphysical Mentor podcast with Michael Philpott. And we are recording. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. This is the Metaphysical Mentor podcast, and I'm your host, Mr. Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me. I am really excited about this topic, and we're going to have an interesting conversation about dreamworks and PTSD dreams. Linda, before we get started, every show, I like to start out by thanking you, the listener. So all my listeners who are listening on Spotify and Apple, I really appreciate that. If you're listening on Apple, do me a favor, leave me a 5-star. Let everybody know that, hey, the show exists out there. I would really appreciate that. It's also on YouTube and Rumble too as well. And for all you YouTube people and all my listeners, head over to my YouTube channel, like, subscribe, hit that smash button, that like button, smash, subscribe, do all that great stuff, leave some comments, all that stuff. I'd really appreciate that. And then for all you listeners too as well, if you'd like to donate to the show, give it a little bit of love, a little bit of sponsorship, because that's you. You are the sponsors of this show. So again, anything that you can do to help out the show would be fantastic. That being said, Linda, I'm going to turn the show over to you. I'm just going to have a quick drink here.
Okay.
All right. So, Linda, I am so happy. You know, we were originally supposed to have this interview last year, and that's actually when your book came out, was last year, correct?
Right. Just a little over a year now.
A little over a year now, and it's such a popular thing. So, one of the things I was very curious about your work is dreamwork itself. Now, I'm a big fan of dreamwork, and I always like, to talk about my own clients about dreamwork. And when doing my research, I found this listening to one of your other episodes that you did with another podcast, and you were saying like dream therapy or dream work is almost like free therapy. And I love that quote, because I think it's dream work is so underrated these days. When did you get started interested in working with DreamWorks in your own practice?
So I first started, thank you. Thank you for listening to the other podcast and for remembering that quote. And I do tell my clients that, they're not limited to the hour a week or every other week. I started with DreamWork in my own personal life. And then as I got more and more interested in it and learned about it, it was a natural transition to bring it into my professional life as well, because I do in my professional life and have for a long time a lot of alternative styles of therapeutic intervention, including EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, a lot of different various energy psychology methods, and a lot of somatic therapies and interventions. And the part that was missing was how to connect the body, mind, heart, and spirit. And dreams really do that.
Yeah.
The dreams come, depending on, you and your listeners' viewpoint, where they come from, at least in part, they are messages from our own psyche, from our own unconscious or subconscious, giving us information that we need and haven't quite been able to access in our waking life. So it's a perfect complement to everything else we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting too. I mean, we can go on to all the other stuff because I'm a big fan of EMDR, EFT, all that stuff, the idea of the somatic stuff. Now, with dreams, so what's the difference between like just a regular dream, a bad dream, and a nightmare?
Right. So a regular dream, the way we differentiate between those types of dreams is based on what's called the emotional narrative in the dream. So we have our storyline, we have what happens, we have the characters, we have the setting, the images, and then in addition to the sort of the storyline of the dream, we have the emotions that go along with the dream. So the emotional narrative accompanying your dream is what helps us differentiate between a dream, a bad dream, or a nightmare. So a quote unquote regular dream would be one that has pleasant or neutral emotions, where you're feeling happy or you're feeling good or you're feeling curious, some kind of a positive or neutral emotion. A bad dream would be one, I would call, where you would be a little upset, a little concerned, a little worried, a little uneasy, but not full-blown panic or terror or dread or anger. When it gets to the category of what we would call a nightmare is when the emotions are sort of really overtaking us or overwhelming us in the dream scene and in the dream itself. So when we have large, difficult emotions in our dream, like fear, like panic, like anger, then we would put it into the category of nightmare.
Okay. So it's basically the extent of the emotion that's really causing the differentiate between the different dreams. So with that emotion, is it because usually during our waking time that we're usually trying to suppress those type of emotions? And then while we're sleeping, the gateway to the subconscious is open for our body to try to process those type of emotions that may have been caused by some type of trauma?
You said it beautifully. I don't even know that I have much to add to that, because yes, when we're talking about the extreme end of the spectrum of nightmares caused by trauma, trauma can be a variety of different things. It could be something that happened yesterday or last week or last year or in our childhood or in our family history, for that matter. It can be personal trauma, it can be global trauma, it can be family trauma. So there's a lot of different varieties of traumatic events and experiences that one can have. And we can only process as much as our being is able to process in the moment of what's happening. So we have a lot of different internal mechanisms for keeping ourselves safe and sane. And one of those mechanisms is what's called dissociation.
Yeah.
So dissociation is when your body-mind system cannot process anymore. There's too much going on in your childhood or in your adolescence or last week or last month, whatever it is where the traumas occurred. So your body-mind wisely makes a separation and sort of splits off parts of the memory, whether it's parts of the narrative memory of what happened or parts of the emotional memory. So you're remembering things, but have no feelings about it. Either the memory of the storyline of what happened or the memory of the emotions connected to that get tucked away in a hidden corner somewhere in our psyche until our being determines that it's safe enough in our daily life now for us to begin to remember, reclaim, and then therefore be able to process the things that we had to tuck away until we were ready.
I think that's probably the most difficult part of the healing journey is to feel that safety in order to move forward and to address those things. Because depending on the type of trauma and whatever has happened in the individual's life, it could be really horrific. You know, some really deep, dark stuff that has been, tucked away, and for a good reason in order to protect yourself on those different levels. So is there ways of knowing when to start working with that? Maybe we should clarify the types of trauma and maybe work on PTSD first. So just give a broad definition of that. So for people who are listening, they can understand when it might be a good idea to really start working and developing that, because most of the times we're just go on an automatic pilot. We're basically zombies. We walk through, we walk through our life, we're shut down. We don't want to feel these things. And I mean, I can talk to my own life and what's been going on, but let's talk about the PTSD, because, a lot of people right now have a lot of trauma, and this part of the spiritual waking is they're waking up to this part of healing the aspect of their inner selves. And some people just not recognize it. So maybe we can touch on that if you don't mind.
Sure. So when we use the word trauma and the phrase PTSD kind of gets tossed around a lot these days. It's become part of the vernacular, and the kids, the young people, they kind of throw these words around. I remember my daughter was in high school, she'd come home and she'd say that her friends and her would tease each other and say, "Oh, you're off your meds today? Did you forget to take your meds?" And they just kind of throw this stuff around. It's good news, bad news that it's something in conversation, but it loses its meaning as well. So, so trauma can be what we'd say sort of capital T or small t trauma. And small t would be the little things that annoy us, irritate us, upset us, but aren't life-threatening to ourselves or others. and that we can pretty easily recover from unless we've got a backlog of other stuff that we're carrying around. So if you have a fender bender, or your cat scratches you badly, or you have an argument with your partner and you don't make up right away and you're still mad at each other a week later and it's really kind of eating away at you, these are all upsetting and bad things, but they would still be in the category of sort of smaller T trauma because they're not life-threatening. No one is endangered. Hopefully with a fender bender, you have insurance, the other person had insurance, you make up with your partner, your scratch heals, and so on. When we have something that is not resolved and that is experienced as life-threatening, whether or not it is, if it's experienced as life-threatening, and particularly when it persists, there can be single episode trauma and then ongoing trauma. So a single episode trauma might be, for example, a natural disaster. We just, Hawaii just had those horrific fires. Afghanistan has been having one earthquake after another. Actually, I can't even call the earthquakes in Afghanistan a single natural disaster because they keep coming. Any kind of single event, a serious sudden illness once, that's not a chronic illness. These would be single event traumas. But there's lots of type of trauma that go on and on and on, particularly if you've grown up in a family where there's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, serious neglect, ongoing medical trauma, abandonment, kind of the list goes on. And then there's no chance to catch your breath, and there's no chance to recover in between. And there's no place that feels like real or relative safety before or after, because it's sort of endless. So in that case, the trauma goes very deep into our system, and then we are at risk for developing PTSD. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Not everyone who has a trauma develops PTSD, and it's not something we refer to when someone is in the middle of their ongoing trauma, because then it's acute. There's nothing post about it. If you're still experiencing a traumatic event, whether it's personal, familial, or global. But once the event or events themselves are no longer occurring, and you're still having symptoms of response as if you were still not safe, and as if the trauma was still occurring, then we're in the realm of PTSD.
Okay. Wow. So that's what usually you would understand the post-trauma is, like you're saying, that we're still in, where the body and the mind still think we're still in danger, even though we're not in the danger, but we're into that, hypervigilance, hyper awareness. Exactly. The body is constantly in a state of agitation or aggression because they're always thinking they're in danger. So that's one of the kind of the telltale signs. And you hear this a lot of with veterans. They try to come home, they try to relax, or anybody, like even law enforcement, they have these type of traumas where they see a bag on the side of the road and they assume it's an IED, and they go into a panic mode, and they just can't shut down their nervous system. The nervous system's not. So how much is the nervous system influenced by these traumas?
Oh, a great deal. And that's the key, really. We need to be able to calm down our nervous system in order to heal from the original traumas. And there's a lot of different ways that all include attention to the body and the mind that work the best for calming down our nervous system, because our neuroanatomy and our neurochemistry is still responding as if we were in danger. In our brain, the limbic system of our brain, in particular the amygdala, which is where the fight, flight, and freeze response to danger is situated, goes off. It goes off when it sees a bag by the side of the road, and even years after, the law enforcement. It goes off when there's a loud noise. A client of mine literally today, who had a really pretty horrible childhood with a dad who was not only kind of a raging alcoholic, he also had a mental illness, and he was a batterer. He beat his wife and his kids. And my client grew up with that all his life. So he said to me today, he used the phrase that it feels like in his mind and in his body, there is still this clanging, this alarm bell that goes off at the slightest hint of anything that reminds him, not just is, but that reminds him of not being safe. So the stresses of everyday life that you and I might just kind of roll with or, get over pretty quickly, he's so primed to being in danger himself or having his mom be in danger that he's reacting to things as if he was still 3 or as if he was still 10 or as if his mom still left the family because she was so badly hurt, even though none of those things are happening today.
Yeah, I mean, that's the really the sad part about that is that years later, in 20, 30, 40 years later, the body's still reacting as if they're still in the event. And even though the event has been over for so long, it's those repercussions that afterwards that cause so much the ongoing agony. And then sometimes, and if you look at, I know you talk about the science behind illnesses and all the different things that can come up from this type of trauma that's stored in the body, that all this different diseases start showing up within their system. And it's because of this unresolved trauma. So when did you really start incorporating the dream work? Like what kind of framework did you use to start working with your clients to enable them to start, okay, we're going to start working with your dreams? Because usually, it's not like a normal process for most psychotherapies is to start doing dream work. But when did you start really integrating that part of it?
So after having it in my personal life for quite some time, I joined an organization called IASD, which is the International Association for the Study of Dreams. And it like opened up new worlds because I was surrounded. Every year I go to this amazing conference of people literally from all over the world, scientists, artists, psychotherapists, people now doing stuff with AI, lay people who are studying and working with dreams from a variety of different perspectives. And so when I started to go to the conferences, I began to use it more and more in my practice, in my psychotherapy practice as well. And one of the things you said that's so true is that, most psychotherapists aren't well versed or well taught or don't think of using dream work. And why is that? We are woefully unprepared to deal with our clients' dreams and nightmares because very few graduate schools of counseling, social work, psychology teach it or orient it to us. So one of my big sort of soapboxes, if you will, is the desire to get the study and recognition of the importance of attending to dreams into schools of counseling, psychotherapy, psychiatry, social work, so that we know what to do when our client comes in with a dream. I've had so many of my colleagues say, well, I never thought to ask my client if they were dreaming. Or they'll say, well, my client came in with a dream and I didn't really know what to do with it. I just kind of listened and said, oh, well, what do you think it means? So learning the skills of how to both respond to and then also to ask about and highlight the importance of bringing dreams into the sessions is something that would be really useful for people who want to do depth psychology and get to sort of the roots of the distress. It goes so much faster when you have direct access to unconscious processes, which you get through dream work. And you don't get that in a lot of other ways.
No. Now, the only other way I would think about it is maybe hypnosis, where you're relaxing the patient, long enough that they can access that subconscious mind. Because usually, if you're trying to sit with a client across from you and you're asking about their dreams, their conscious mind is trying to rationalize it, and they're trying to figure out, well, maybe I didn't see this or that. Do you use hypnotherapy in your practice to get them to recall the dreams that they may be working with, or the nightmare, or the specific trauma that may be suppressed within them?
So let me answer that question in a few ways.
Sure, please.
First, I am trained in, and I do use hypnotherapy and hypnotherapeutic techniques in my work, both with and not with dreams. But when someone comes in and they have a dream to work with, I first start with the dream itself. And I ask them, sometimes people will come in and they'll say, I had a dream. So my next question is, do you want to talk about it? Because some people, they don't want to talk about it. They just want to let us know they had a dream. But if they say yes, I say, well, why don't you go ahead and tell me your dream? Because if they're coming in saying I had a dream, they probably already remember it. So we don't need to do a hypnotherapeutic or any other kind of technique in order to help them remember their dreams.
Okay.
We can go in one of two directions right now, which would be, what do we do when someone comes in with a dream? Or what do we do when someone says, I never either remember my dreams, or some people say I don't have dreams, which we can easily tell them, well, actually, we all dream every night. We have, 5 to 7 REM cycles, and we all dream every night. We just don't remember them. We tend to only remember the ones we have just before waking up. And there are many, many ways to help remember and recall the dreams if we want to go in that direction. So your call.
Let's do a dream recall, because I think that's is important, because there are a lot of people who say, oh, I don't dream. And I'm a firm believer that, we all dream. I think it's like anything. It's just about a level of practice and becoming consciously aware that I'm dreaming and that I want to remember the dream, because so much information we can actually find out, like we're trying to problem solve. And a lot of times we'll get those problem solving messages through our dreams. So let's work on, recall, because I think if we can get people to start recalling their dreams and working with that, then they can start, into the process of interpretation and developing a process, like in the book, that they could figure out a way to start working with their dreams in a more constructive way.
Good. So for people who want to remember their dreams and are interested in it, the first thing to do is have the intention and have it be something that is a value and a goal, because we see what we're looking for and we notice what we're paying attention to. So if we really don't care, and some people don't, there are sort of right brain people and left brain people. And if I were to grossly overgeneralize, left brain people who are more sort of linear, mathematical, scientifically oriented, don't really care to remember their dreams as much. It's kind of like random neural firing. This is as far as many of them are concerned, though certainly not all. And the artistic, spiritual, thinner boundaried people tend to look for uncanny and alternative ways of gathering and accessing information that aren't necessarily linear. So for starters, whether you tend to be more scientific or you tend to be more metaphysical, value it. That in and of itself can be enough to jumpstart the recall process. So in addition to that, if you're going to remember your dreams, you have to not fool your unconscious, because it'll know if you're not serious about it. Have a dream journal and writing material next to your bed, or at very least your phone or your device or whatever it is you're going to, type your dream into, or some way to record it in audio fashion. The only downside of the audio is you'll have to transcribe it later, to really work with it, but that might be what works best for people. So you're intending to remember your dream. When you go to sleep at night, you can do a process called dream incubation. And at its simplest, it's simply giving your unconscious or your subconscious self the cue that you want to remember. So you can say, I intend, or I want to remember and be able to record my dream in the morning. That could be your dream incubation. You can also use dream incubation for problem solving. When you have a dilemma or a concern or a question that you want guidance on, you can incubate the specific dilemma or question and ask then for a specific dream to answer that. But just to remember, you can start with, I want to remember. And then when you wake up, write it down as soon as you possibly can upon waking, because, when we sit up, when we move, poof, it's like, wisps of smoke, and the dream just sort of dissipates. So we want to kind of get up slowly, reach for our recording material, write it down. and get as much as you can. Record it in the order in which you dreamt it as much as possible, unless you think, oh my God, there's this little piece at the ending, and if I don't catch the ending first, I'll forget it. Go ahead and write the ending first, but then go back and somehow notate the beginning, the middle, and the end of your dream, because the order that the dream shows up, the beginning, the middle, and the end of your dream, will give us clues and hints as to where you are in your healing and your processing of whatever was going on in the dream.
Okay.
These
So
are a few things.
yeah. So now should we also be aware of the emotion with the dream? Because sometimes that would be the underlying message of the dream is how I feel when I wake.
Exactly.
So yeah, so that would be a good way of understanding that. Now, what happens if you having a dream or you know a nightmare or something like that wakes you out of bed and then you kind of lose that sense because you get jarred up, like usually something with a high impact emotion, you're gonna remember it. Um, they always talk about it's either nightmares or sex dreams. That's what makes you remember certain things when you have that type of excitement. It's like, oh, I remember that dream. But what happens when you wake up and you had to go to the washroom because your bladder's full, and you go to the washroom and you come back and you don't have the same dream, you have a different dream, but the dream prior to you waking up to relieve the bladder was more important than the dream afterwards? Or how can we go back into the first dream?
So in terms of which dream was more important, I'd say there generally is not a hierarchy of importance in dreams, that we want to sort of honor and value all the dreams that come through, including the little tiny snippets when people say, ugh, it was just a snippet, it doesn't matter. Sometimes a snippet is just the Reader's Digest version of the whole thing. But if you are jarred awake, if your alarm clock went off, or you have to go to the bathroom, or whatever it is, one of my favorite ways for recapturing the dream that you had is what's called positional memory. And that means you put your body back in the same position that it was in when you had the dream.
I like
so
that.
If you sleep on your left side and your knees are curled up and you kind of got your hands clutching your pillow, do that. And it never ceases to amaze me how if I lie still for a few seconds, almost inevitably, I'm going to recapture the threads of the dream and then be able to sort of weave them back together into the wholeness of the dream.
Wow, I like that. I really like that idea because often myself, I'll find times where it's like I'm having this dream and it seems very prophetic, and then all of a sudden, oh, geez, I gotta go. Gotta go to the washroom, and then you go to the washroom, come back, and it's like, where's that dream? Because it was just kind of that profound dream. So what happens to us when we have such a recurring dream that recurs the same dream over and over and over again, whether it's a bad dream or a nightmare, but especially if it's a nightmare, why does it just keep persisting?
Yeah, I'm going to answer your question, but I want to just give a little lightness to what you were saying before, because you've mentioned a few times going to the washroom, which is a lovely euphemism.
Yes.
So depending on what you need to do in the washroom, you can bring your journal with you, and when you're done, write it right there. Just a suggestion. I mean, if you got once your hands are free, or
Yeah.
if you're talking into your phone, you only need one hand. So that was just, on the lighter side there.
I like that idea. Yeah, I'll wash my hands first and then make sure I have
Right. I've had dreams that I remember. I'm standing in the shower, it's in the morning, and I'm in the shower, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I had a dream and I'm remembering it. So what I'll do if I'm standing in the shower, for example, is I'll kind of repeat in my mind what I remember, through the rest of the shower until I've dried off, and then I'll go write it down. So it's sort of never too late to capture it if you can. So to your other question though, about nightmares, bad dreams, and reoccurring dreams. Reoccurring dreams are like an SOS from the unconscious, which is telling us there's something you're not done with. There's something that's unresolved. There's something that's still haunting you or following you that needs your attention. And our dreams will continue to kind of up the ante, sometimes getting more and more insistent and more strident until we finally pay attention. But basically, this is an adept from a way of thinking from ADEP, which is accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy, that we are all hardwired for healing. Our body, mind systems want to move in the direction of wholeness and healing, even if we're having nightmares. But there are things we have to resolve and we have to do in order to get there. So the nightmares are like an SOS saying, wake up to your dreams. There's something you need to either remember or work with or confront or receive, and any or all of the above. And then there's going to be a call to action. Once we understand, what is this nightmare about? Where did it come from? What do we need in order to heal ourselves or others of the characters in the nightmare? Then there's going to be some kind of real world live action to do. It might be a ritual. It might be a contribution to a cause. It might be making amends with your parent who you haven't spoken to in 3 years. Whatever it is, the dream will then direct us toward action steps we can take in our life that will actually change our lives.
Wow. I like that. So when should a person seek professional help with some type of trauma or PTSD or anything like that? When is there a good indication that they should really kind of seek professional help and get into some type of therapy?
When their nightmares or their waking struggles or symptoms are interfering with their life and their ability to function. If they're struggling to get out of bed because they're so depressed, or if they can't leave the house because they're so anxious. I'm using sort of extreme examples here.
Yes.
But if their daily life and functioning, and if their relationships with friends, parents, loved ones, children are suffering because they're otherwise preoccupied with either too much or too little, too much fear, too little feeling, numbness, depression, or fear and anger, the two sort of ends of the upset spectrum, then it's probably time to say, I haven't been able to get past this on my own. It's probably time to talk to someone. And if they're having nightmares where they're waking up in panic, or they're kicking their partner, or their partner is saying, you've woken me up every night for the past 2 months screaming. Do you know why? And you don't. That might be a hint that there's something you're screaming about in your sleep that you really need to pay attention to, both for your own well-being and for the sake of your partner getting a good night's sleep as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that there used to be a large stigma attached to mental health and getting help, and I know as a man, it's very, very difficult to reach out for help and to actually say that hey, I'm struggling here, maybe I should go see somebody, because we're the worst for that. It's like, no, I'm fine, no worries, I'll just continue on with my life. No, I'm fine, don't worry about it. And, we always try to minimalize it and just move on and just got to man up. But yeah, it's just one of those things that, which is a horrible thing for men in general, but also just for humanity itself, and where we just suppress all that stuff and it just lingers, and you just can't be the perfect person that you wanted to be and enjoy that health, that vitality. So I always say to other guys, I say, listen, hey, I went down the therapy route, and I'm sure glad I did. And when I hit my bottom, I there was no choice. It was just simple. I needed to get, figure things out. So I always highly encourage everybody that if they're struggling to reach out and to start doing and taking care of their mental health. And it's difficult. It's not, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're going to get into some mucky stuff and it's going to suck. But for the most part, I find it was very liberating at the same time too. And it's that sense of healing. And it's just that continuous growth as a human. I just think we should all be looking and striving to do that. So one of the things you talk about in your book is about this Gaia technique, which I was really curious about. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yes. I just want to
Or for a
also
minute?
really appreciate and underscore your shout out to in general all people, but in particularly people of the male persuasion who are not as apt to talk about their feelings as much, and that's a societal thing that we're taught differently. And one of the good things I think that's going on now with the younger generation is it's much more common and much more out there. And the kids, the young people are talking about having all the feels now. I don't know if you've heard that in your work, but rather than feelings, they're saying, I'm having a lot of feels. Let's talk about all those feels. And I love it. I think it's great. And in the last couple of years, I've seen a lot more both young men and older men, sort of seek out help, which I think is just a great sign. I actually would love for every teenager to be mandated. Part of their school curriculum is going to be at least some short-term therapy, because every teenager is going through such a metamorphosis of every single part of their life, including their body with their hormones changing. It would be just, like I think everyone should learn how to swim. Riding a bike is a good skill for everyone to have, and a little bit of learning to look at yourself, recognize a feeling before it hits you over the head and breaks you down would be really good for all of our young people and then older people as well.
Yeah, I just find the emotionally intelligent individuals, it's such something that we need to strive for a little bit more. It just makes us more healthier and to deal with the struggles of life, because life can really suck, and it can really drag you down. And if you don't have the necessary tools, like you said, if you have necessary tools at a young age, you can use those in times of stress, and to manage your stress, to understand what's going on, but understand what's happening with you, so that you can self-regulate in a very healthy way, instead of reaching for pills or video games or alcohol, wherever else you try to do in order to mitigate
Right.
any of the problems that you're facing.
Yeah. Yeah. Most addictive behaviors are attempts at self-regulation and affect management. So absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So remember we were going to talk about the Gaia,
Right. The Gaia method.
the Gaia method. I thought that was very, very fascinating about the guided imagery.
So when we're working with nightmares, they're scary. And most people would rather not attend to or look too closely at things that are frightening. They'd rather run the other direction. That's true for things in waking life and in our sleeping life and our nightmares too, which I think is part of the reason why people don't talk about it as much or get into therapy or find a group to process their dreams with, because who wants to revisit that stuff? So I developed a method of dream work called the Gaia method, which stands for Guided Active Imagination Approach. And it's based on two principles. One is on the Jungian style of active imagination, where we can re-enter in waking life the dream and then move around with the dream itself as we're awake, so we can work with and rework different aspects of the dream that might not have come to a good resolution the first time. So that's the Jungian leg. The other pillar that the Gaia method is based on is best practice trauma treatment. And that's based in part, or in large part really, on my experience and study of EMDR. Because when we do EMDR, we first start with resourcing and finding safety and getting to a safe, resourced place with enough people, objects, scenes to be able to come back to neutral, come back to a pleasant place before we move into the traumatic or difficult material. So in the Gaia method, there are 3 steps. And the first step is about establishing safety and resources. So once someone has shared that they had a nightmare or a dream, and I ask them if they want to tell it, they may or may not say yes. If they say no, then I say, do you need first to feel safe enough to even tell the dream? If they say yes and they want to tell the dream, I let them tell the dream. Then I say, before we go into that dark place, let's make sure that this time, A, you're not alone, and B, you have resources to feel safe, secure, and protected before we deal with this material. So the whole first part of the dream work, we don't even touch the dream, but we say,
Okay.
what are the people? What are the spiritual guides? Do you have pets? Are there objects? Is there safe places? And we create a list of the people, the places, the objects that help give them comfort and safety. So, for example, somebody might have a best friend. They say, well, you know what? I want to bring my BFF with me into the dream. Great, let's put him or her on call. Someone else might say, I want to bring Jesus with me because Jesus is my spiritual guide and my comfort person. Let's bring Jesus. Get Jesus on call. One of the little kids I worked with said, I'd like Mary Poppins to come with me because she can do everything and she's magic and she can keep me safe. So great, we'll bring Mary Poppins. I have people bring their pets, either alive or dead. I have people bring their ancestors who were resources to them in their life, who are no longer alive, but are still available in spirit. So let's bring your mom, whether or not she's passed away 5 years ago, she's still here for you. So we gather the people, alive or dead, spiritual or cartoon or from a myth or a fairy tale, as a posse. And then I'll say, are there any objects, any talismans that you'd like to bring with you to feel safe, secure, and protected? And people come up with all kinds of different ideas. A particular item of clothing. I'm going to bring the shawl that my grandmother gave me. I'm going to bring that with me into the dream. Or I'm going to bring a flashlight because it's dark in there. One of my millennials said, I'm bringing my phone because I can take a picture, it's got a flashlight, and I can call for help if I need to. And if I put tracking on, if I get lost in there, someone can find me. I thought that was a brilliant resource to have.
I like that idea.
Yeah. So we collect all the things, and the protocol is, I keep saying, is there anything else? Do you need anything else to feel safe, secure, and protected? Until they say, no, I'm all set. And I can't tell you how many times people will think they're done when they're not. And then I just keep saying, anything else? And then, oh yeah, now that you mentioned it, one more thing. So once we get it, no, I'm all set. Then the next step in the Gaia method is taking all the people and objects and places that you've gathered. Don't go into the dream yet, but stand outside the dream and peek into it from the outside. See whether or not there might be some safe, comforting people, magic, resources, protection in your dream that you might have missed the first time around that you told it. Or you might have noticed but forgot to mention. Because sometimes in that scary nightmare where they're in the jungle and the lion is chasing them and they can feel the breath, they forgot to notice that actually over in the corner there is a wise woman sitting on the ground with long braids and a lot of wrinkles on her face. And she is a lion talker, but I didn't notice that at first. So I can access her. She was already there, I just didn't notice.
Wow.
Once we've accessed external and internal resources, then I invite the person to go into the dream. Here's the active imagination part. And we interact with the characters, we interact with the objects, with the scenario of what's happening. And we keep moving the self character in the dream through with the safety and protection until there's a resolution that's safe and positive this time through. So we're sort of re-dreaming the dream forward. We're dreaming it on.
I like that. I love that idea. That's it. It seems so very simplistic, but it's very, there's very levels of depth to it, which I find fascinating because those small little things that, because we're so focused on the emotion, the fear, or whatever is elicited during that dream, that the small little details, like you were saying about the lady who's sitting there, could be the one who might have the answers, but you're worried about, the dragon, the lion, or anybody else that's representing this fear that it's chasing you or doing whatever the illicit fear is,
right,
or the emotion, I should say, that's causing that. I just think that's very, very, I think that's a really neat idea. Now, with your EMDR, because I've used EMDR and I'm a huge fan of that. It's changed my life, from a big level, like just quieting down the nervous system is, I can't say enough about it. Like, I mean, people talk to me. I had a really good friend of mine who had a serious phobia, and we were talking to her for years to go to EMDR, and she finally went, and it settled her straight down. And I just find it so amazingly work. So with the EMDR, can we just touch on that a little bit? I know we're kind of moving around the topic, but I just find I love discussing it. I think it's a fabulous tool for people out there. Maybe just touch on, what it is and how effective it can be.
Sure. What's really wonderful, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And the original method designed by Francine Shapiro has to do with having your eyes move back and forth so that you're processing on two sides of your brain. So you're able to cross midline, and inside of our brain there's like a seam in the middle of the brain called the corpus callosum that separates right brain and left brain, and different things that happen to us in our life and different ways of accessing the world are from our right brain or our left brain. We need our whole brain to be able to process something fully. And what EMDR beautifully does is allows us to access all the parts of our brain and sort of cross that neural network to process more fully. Since the original founding, if you will, of the EMDR, we now know that anything that allows bilateral stimulation of the brain will work. So it could be eye movement going back and forth. It could be auditory sounds, right ear, left ear. And it could be tapping on the right side of the body, the left side of the body. And with kids, we're doing this with a group. You put your hands like this and you hold your thumbs and your palms are facing you. And you put your hands over your collarbones and you tap right and you tap left. This is called the butterfly hug.
I like that.
We do this not only with kids, but with adults too. And it's incredibly calming to the nervous system, just the tapping itself, but you're reprocessing as you're tapping. So what's fascinating, I think, about EMDR and working with dreams and nightmares is what is REM? It's eye movements, right? Rapid eye movement. So there's a correlation between the kind of work we can do with the dreams and nightmares that come from REM sleep. Our eyes are already tracking in our dreams what's going on. And then in waking life, if we use a method such as EMDR, or we're doing dream work, even if we're not doing EMDR, we are processing in a similar way. Our neurobiology experiences it as processing through parts of our brain that normally don't talk so well to each other.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I find it so fascinating. I'm always a big fan of EMDR or EFT or the combination of thing, but also too with the dream work. So I was very excited. I was like, maybe we could just have a whole conversation on EMDR and the benefits of EMDR and PTSD, because, I found it very, very helpful for me. It just calmed my system so down. And it was amazing how it just reset everything and just, like you said, made the two hemispheres whole again. That's what, I really found was very, very. So is there maybe a little piece of advice or something you can leave the listeners who are listening or who are watching the video? And maybe you can give them a little golden nugget of information that they can take away with the show today.
Well, to boil it down to one or two nuggets would be: pay attention to your dreams, respect and honor them. They have information for you. Listen to what they're telling you. And we know that two heads are better than one for many things. Even Jung himself and Freud were saying, I can't find the full meaning of my dream by myself. I need to talk about it with at least one other person. So find someone to talk about it with, because they will have insights and perceptions that you can't have by yourself, because you can't see the back of our own heads unless we've got not one but two mirrors. And then if you want to go even further, work with a dream circle, work with a group of people, because then you get a variety of perspectives and associations to the dream that you yourself or you and one other person might not have thought of. And the beauty of working with a group of people in a group is then we all resonate with each other's dreams. So even if we're working on your dream, I'm going to get a takeaway. And so is the person next to me and the person next to me from our work together on your dream. So
now, just to touch on that, we're working with dream, like a group or something. Have you ever heard like where people start showing up in each other's dreams to help them out?
Oh, yeah. I've been running dream circles for years and years and years, and particularly the circles that have been going on for a long time. People are dreaming each other's dreams, and they'll come in and wow, everybody had the theme of X today. Everyone had bathrooms in their dream today, for example, just like out of the blue. And that actually does happen, not just because we were talking about it before. Or everyone had something the color red in their dream. How strange is that? I have one woman in the group who is a mom, and her daughter lives in the same apartment complex, so they see each other often, and they will often dream share, and they will turn up with the same theme, if not the same dream, and that's check in the morning. So it's really interesting.
Yeah,
that's a whole other conversation about like layers of consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I love that sort of stuff, and I just think it's so fascinating. And Linda, if people are looking to find your work, find where you are on the World Wide Web, all your books, all that stuff, do you have the floor right now? Tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay. So my website is it's Linda Yael Schiller, all one word. That would be LindaYaelSchiller.com. And that's my new improved website that really will point you in the direction of what I'm doing with my work these days. And I have 2 books that are out. I'm working on a third. I'll tell you about that in a sec.
Nice.
And each book has their own website, and you can go to the website for the book, and you can look it up on Amazon. The first book is called Modern Dreamwork, and it's www.moderndreamwork.com. And the second book is PTSDreams. They both have subtitles, but it's enough to just have the main point. And that's, again, www.PTSDreams.com. So you can read about the book on the websites. And then if you want to buy it from the publishers, Llewellyn Worldwide Publishing. And it's also on Amazon, and it's on Bookshop. They're both on bookshop.org, which is a compendium of independent bookstores that you can also support.
Beautiful.
And coming up next, I just got a new contract from Llewellyn. I'm writing a book on ancestral dreaming. So
Ooh.
that's the next thing coming down the pipeline.
Well, congratulations on that. So we'll have to kind of schedule once the book comes out and have you back on and talk about that, because that'd be a really fascinating topic about ancestral, because I'm all about ancestral, past lives, all that crazy stuff. I absolutely adore that. And for everybody listening, I'll have Linda's information in a description below, like I always do for every show, for all my guests. So you just scroll down, you'll see it says see more. I'll actually have all that information. So you just have to click on the link, and you can find, you can go to Linda's website, find out all the great information. You can pick up one of her books, understand what's going on. It's a great read. It's an invaluable tool. That's one of the things I always say, start doing your dream work, and it'll really help. Really help out. Linda, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we finally got to make it happen. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, it certainly was. And I'm just, again, very, very thankful and grateful for that. So I'm just going to close off the podcast here. So this has been the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye for now.